Hey, welcome back to Outbuilding. This is the part of the workshop playlist. My name's Steve, and today I'm going to work on a 4-unit drawer stack that's going to hang down below this, and it's going to test a bunch of different things. This is my test module, and I'm going to test how big of space I can have underneath there as a sort of a drawer to store tools. I want to make sure I get that height right. I'll test the drawer function, and then I've got a kind of a unique way I'm hoping to do the handles on the drawers that don't involve any hardware or anything. So I look forward to trying that in this episode. So in the previous episode where I did this 10 by 10 MFT middle section, that has already got rails in there with holes in it prepared for these drawers. So I'm just going to build a carcass that has the matching holes. I'll use dogs to put that together and secure them with a little quick knob, and then I can take it apart just as easily as I put it together. So I already cut out the birch plywood. This is 18mm birch plywood. I cut that out to the shape of this box. This box is going to sort of riff on everything that I think we can do with the cabinets where I don't have a bottom in them, partly because you don't want to use that material, but also then you don't accumulate dust and little bits of scrap in there. So I'm going to build this into a sort of a cabinet carcass, a simple cabinet carcass. It's going to hang off this MFT table, and then we'll work on some drawers. These are the jigs I'm going to use for the drawer fronts, and I'm excited to show you that and excited to see how the results work because I've never tried it. But before I do that, I need to glue up a box to kind of hold the jig, and I'm going to glue that up now so that it's sort of drying while I am working on the cabinet carcass. So I'll throw this together real quick and get it gluing, and then we can use it later. Try out these drawer fronts. Okay, so I got my birch sides cut out, and this is the side that's kind of the inside because it's got a plug in it, and I'm just going to use my jig once again. And again, I can put a link up here and show you the video where I built this jig, but this has proven to be pretty useful for just getting stuff laid out. So I'm going to put the same holes in the same positions that they were in the top underneath here, so that those can tie up. Assemble my jig here, and that gets me registered on the corner to create an initial hole. And then I don't want this thing to be smashed up against the top, so I measured this out and made it a 1/4 inch smaller. So I've got a 1/4 inch spacer here that I'm going to use just to draw it back from the edge a little bit on the top. And then I can use my sort of 2-hole or 2-layer guide here, and I'll just get that started. And then I'll use the ruler again, and I need my spacer. And this just ensures that it's parallel going across. All right, so I drilled my other holes for the pins, got my jig up here, and I did learn a trick with the plywood. If you just cut about 2/3 of the way through and then flip the board over, you get a really clean cut both sides and no tear out. So I'll go ahead and do that now for the 2 holes I need. So coming through from both sides, you get no tear out and really super clean holes. And just check to make sure that the dogs fit. It's a little bit snug, so I'll use the reamer to clean it out. With my holes in place, I need to now cut a little notch because there's a frame element up underneath there that's going to get in the way. So I can measure those out and cut them out. All right, so this is a sidewall of the cabinet, and now I'll crawl underneath and I'll just test fit this and make sure that that's fitting and that I don't need to trim anything else before I start putting together the cabinet. So I think the way to do this is to first load the holes I've got in the bench with the the dogs. And then I'll try to slide my piece up in there and see if I can get it to hang. Looks like got to trim it just a little bit to get it to fit. All right, well that was a little bit more of a struggle than I expected, but I got the side, both sides in, so now I can assemble that carcass. I don't have to mess with that as one whole piece. All right, so this is my first time actually using the grid holes to do some track saw work, which is kind of fun. That's where I'm headed with this, but I haven't had everything set up for that. And I'm finding that it's going to take me a while to accumulate the right number of dogs of the right size and stuff like that. So I've got some little UJK dogs here that are wonderful, but they're just not tall enough to be able to use my rail clips with the 3/4 inch MDF that I'm going to cut. And I've got a board here that I can run through the table saw and get really good parallel sides on, but then I'm having a hard time. I have just a little tiny miter jig on my table saw that's a little janky. So for me to get a good square cut on that is tough. So that's where I'm going to start using the track saw for that kind of thing. All right, so I've got it pushed against these dogs on this side to get it square, and I've got the fence tied into these, clamped down, and I can go ahead and make my just trim cut just to get a good square edge to work from, and then I'll measure out the next one. And just to be sure, I'm checking this for square on that first cut. And it looks pretty good. And with that squared up and measured out, I can now cut my other piece and see how, then I'll check across the diagonals and see how square I ended up. All right, so checking for square. Looks really good on the sides, and I can for belt and braces, check across the diagonal. And it's super accurate. That's really fun to be able to get that right like that. So this is the back of the box. I'll work on some other pieces here and then start assembling this. So it's kind of fun. For these next cuts, I've got 3/8 inch, which is going to form the bottom of the drawers. And it is thin enough that I can use these bench dogs these UJK dogs with the rail clips. And so that'll be nice to try. And as I said, I'm kind of learning as I go here, and I'll learn what dogs I need for various thicknesses and kind of slowly come up with that. But as far as I understand it, that will keep me square here, and I can trim this piece first to get a good square end, and then I'll measure and cut my drawer bottoms. All right, so I know in my last video I was using this pocket jig and I was whining about the little bushings coming out. They slide out and spin around. And so I just mixing up a little tiny bit of epoxy. Just gonna put just a little dab on those. And I can always probably break those out if I need to, if they get old. But it'd probably be an easy fix. This along with the drill bit. The drill bit was not so good that came with these, so got a new drill bit. So I'll give that a few minutes to cure. It's 5-minute epoxy, and then I'll start putting together the holes to assemble this carcass. Okay, so having epoxied those in there, hopefully that holds together while I'm drilling, and I've got little lines marked where I'm going to put my holes, so I can just go ahead and start plowing through, drilling in the pocket holes for the pocket screws. Putting carcasses together this way is not something I've done before. I've always used like dados and staples and other things to do it. But I've got some little spacers that I cut out that I'll use to kind of keep my box the same width, kind of independent of exactly where the bottom is. And I'm going to mostly screw these together, but I'll put just a little splash of glue on these parts just to help hold things together once it gets going. And it's also pretty new for me to use pocket screws, so it's kind of fun to try new stuff. And I know from doing pocket screws before, they tend to kind of migrate a little bit when you go to drive them, so I'm going to clamp this up so that it's holding together while I'm screwing it, and hopefully that keeps everything from wandering around too much when I'm screwing it. So there's one other jig I need to get glued up. This is kind of how the drawer guides are going to work. There's going to be a groove cut in the MDF that sits on the side, and then the drawer is going to sit in there. And so I cut this piece of oak out. It's a tight fit, but it's a nice absolute fit. And I'm going to glue that on, and I'm going to make a little router jig so that I can use one groove to prepare to route the next groove and work my way across a board. There's a bunch of different ways you could do that, and when I get my router table better set up with a better fence, I'll do it that way. But for now, I'm going to make this jig to do this, and so I need to glue this up. I've got a spacer, and I've already glued up a back piece here, which is kind of where the router is going to sit, and it's going to register in this groove. So I'm going to use that spacer to get my spline exactly where I need it, and I'll just let that sit and dry while I'm working on some other stuff. One of the things I'm going to do is not put a bottom where the drawers are. There's several reasons I'm doing that. One of them is that you don't need that material. It's kind of a waste. The second is you're going to see that the bottom of the drawer is going to be very close to the bottom of what would be the panel here. And that's so close that if it got dirt or sawdust or something in there, it could scrape and then kind of cause the drawer to bind. But I do need to kind of put in a little filler strip here to kind of pick up the bottom drawer. You'll see how the bottom drawer, I'm trying to make all the drawers the same so I don't have to make a unique depth of the bottom drawer, which is something that you often have to do if you're doing the drawers this way. So I'm going to use a couple biscuits or 3 biscuits here to join this little filler strip on the side, and I've got one down here on the bottom I'll put on that side as well. And you'll see how that integrates with the drawers in a bit here when I put them together. All right, so the glue's dried and the box is all put together now. So now I need to work on the drawer guides, and I'm going to use, this is commonly done, it's MDF I'm going to cut grooves in it with the router and let the drawer bottom slide in there. So I'm just sort of test fitting this. The back in there is not attached yet, so I can knock that through to get it to the right depth. But these fit, and I need a little bit of clearance, and I'm going to show you why in a minute, because there's what I would call the bottom drawer problem, and that is that the bottom drawer, you don't want it really sitting flat on the bottom here because it won't slide as well. So I'm going to put just really thin rails on the sides for it to slide on. And so I need a little bit of space, but I'll go ahead and cut the grooves first and show you what I mean by that. I'm going to have, because this is pretty precise and I used a blank to kind of position all this so that it's exactly the dimension I want inside the box, I'm going to have pretty tight tolerances for the drawers. I'll see if that works, and if they need to be opened up, I can cut them down a little bit. The jig I glued up earlier relies on a first groove, and then it builds grooves after that. So I first need to start by putting the initial groove on the very edge of the boards. Here I'm giving the bench a try with the jig to see how it works on just a little test piece to see if my spacing is going to line up right. I'm also accounting for the thickness of the jig and the depth of the groove with some little gauge blocks to get the router set up. With everything set up, it was time to give it a try with the jig on the real board. Okay, so first test of this didn't work as well as I'd hoped, but I think it's something I can salvage. In one case, I need to clamp my initial rail to the other board just because it drifted on me a little bit when I was routing. So this one's that was just a user error, so that one didn't work. And then these, it's kind of interesting. There's this notion of stack up error. So each time I do this, it's going to introduce a small amount of error. And so by the time you get to the third one, it's 3 times as much error. And so on this side, I've got really consistent spacing. Basically, one side's just slightly off, and this is the side that is doing quite well, and this side is a little bit less. So I think I can salvage this jig. I think I can run it through the table saw and just kiss the edge of it and get it parallel to the guide rail. That guide rail sits down in the groove, and it's super firm, so that's great for holding the router steady. It's just I've got to get that thing absolutely parallel. And in this case, I was lucky because I can remove material to get to the dimension I want. I don't have to add material. So I'm not convinced this is the perfect way to do this, but once I get this jig aligned better, it should work pretty well. All right, well, having sort of thought about this as I cut out new pieces and rerouted the groove for the initial part, 2 things I thought about. One of them is it was way easier. There's probably a better way if you're going to make a parallel jig like this to actually get it close, but give yourself a little bit of room and then go back over with the table saw. Because now I'm pretty assured that that lower rail is parallel to this upper rail by running it through the table saw. So that was probably a lesson learned, certainly a lesson learned. And then I've got this clamped down better. And I had the intuition that this was going to be an issue and should have just listened to that intuition. So that's the other piece, is listen to your thoughts as you're doing this stuff. I'll give this a try and hopefully it works a little bit better. All right, we'll check and see how I did. That one's almost exactly 9 inches on my third of their fourth cut, really. So that one was good. And that one is too. There's just almost no difference between them. So it was worth going back and redoing this. I'm down to the last couple pieces of MDF, so I'm lucky that that one worked. I'll cut the other one here. These will be a little bit shorter, but they only need to carry the bottom part of the drawer, and I'll show you how that works. This will make it a little bit easier to install, but the OCD part of me will always notice that, and it will always remind me to be a little bit more careful and possibly to cut that parallel piece on the table saw. I'll get this other one cut and we'll put it together. Okay, so these are cut out now, and sort of lesson learned there. They're not, like I said, they're not quite tall enough to go to the top, but really it just is wanting to catch that bottom of the drawer here. And this is where I can describe the bottom drawer problem, if you will. I want a 1/16 of an inch below the drawer as extra dead space, and then I want a 1/16 of an inch between each of my drawers, and then another 1/16 up at the top. So that's fine, except on this bottom thing, there's no way to have a place to catch the drawer and have the drawer have a runner on it to sit on for this bottom drawer. So one way you can manage that is to make this leg a little bit longer and make your drawer front a little bit larger for the bottom drawer. But I want these drawers to be completely interchangeable. So the way I'm going to try to do this, and we'll see if this works, is I ripped a couple of really thin, they're just 1/16 of an inch strips. I'm going to glue those down in the bottom here, and then I'm going to set my drawer up on top. So I've got that 1/16 of an inch I want to work with for the drawer to slide on. The drawer will slide on this little thing. That'll avoid it scraping on this bottom, and also hopefully be pretty symmetric with all the rest of them, so that I'm spaced off and my drawer fronts will fit in there and everything. So I'll give that a try and see how it goes. This is all part of an experiment, but seems to be going together pretty well. Never thought about it, but one of the benefits of having a bottomless cabinet is it's easy to get inside there to work on the drawer fronts, which is kind of nice, or the drawer guides. So I've got my little strip here that I'm just going to put a little bead of glue on. It's going to sit on the bottom, and it's going to be captivated by the other drawer guides. And I've got a mark here for the depth of my drawers because they're inset a little bit. So that goes down there. And then I'll glue these, and I'm just going to put some screws on them to hold them, but this is the drawer guide With those drawer guides in place, I can now glue the back of the cabinet into the drawer guides because they offer a good bulkhead for it to sit against. All right, and then I can just test fit my drawer bottoms before I assemble my drawers and see how that's working. That's on that bottom 16th inch groove. That feels pretty good. Seems to slide well. And then these upper ones should be the same. There we go. The drawer carcass is all done. Now I can start working on drawers. And these are, basic format is going to be, it's a piece of 3/8 inch particle board on the bottom. And then I've got side rails and a front and back that create a box for the drawer. And this is, basically I want to thank Dennis from Hooked on Wood, so thank you, Dennis. This is basically his information I took from his website. I know a bunch of people have made him this way, so I don't know that he was the original guy to do this. But basically you build that box, and to make that a little bit easier and get it square, I've created, I just cut out a piece of wood that I'll use as sort of my mold, if you will, and I'll use pocket screws and put this together. So I'll make a little frame for the box drawer. I'll screw that down to the both bottom and the rails that act as the sort of slides for the drawer in the cabinet, in the carcass. And then I'll work on a drawer front. I'm excited about the drawer fronts. I'll put these drawers together quickly. And I should note that kind of following Dennis's thoughts, I'm going to make all the drawers the same height. They'll have different sized drawer fronts. And I'll see if that doesn't contain my things, if things are kind of falling out or getting in the way, I'll consider doing bigger drawers. But it does make sense to me to make these all of one common form factor. And so I'll knock these out pretty quickly and we'll get to working on the drawer fronts. So for these tops, I'm just gonna, or the bottoms, I'll just put down a little bead of glue around the frame. And I kind of checked the frame. My pocket joints, I'm still learning, they're not perfect. So I picked the ones that were just slightly proud on the front here. So when I put my drawer front on, it won't get kicked out and be at a funny angle. They're pretty close, but I probably could do a little better there. And then I've marked up the base here with where things line, and then I cut out a couple of spacers and ripped them up so that I could get this square when I'm mounting it and not worry about doing kind of three things at once. So just a little bit off here now, and I can clamp this to square it up before I shoot staples in it. And there we go, first drawer. Okay, so now for the drawer fronts. These are the blanks here, and I've got something exciting to try that I've never done before, so we'll see how this works. This started with, I had this idea for using different router bits to kind of create a drawer front that's a pocket in the drawer itself, so there's no hardware. And so I've never done this with my laser, but I tried cutting MDF and some masonite. I burned a bunch of masonite. I couldn't get it to go through the masonite with different settings. I messed around with the MDF and this 3/8 inch MDF once I found the right settings, and I'll put those in the, it's going to be different for every laser, so it may not be relevant for you, but I've got a CO2 laser. It's a 60 watt laser, and I was able to burn these pretty well and get nice, this is just my little test pattern. And those worked really well. I was actually super excited about that because I can make jigs with that. I can make some little drawer inserts for organizing things and some other stuff that I haven't done before now that I know how to cut that MDF. And I can probably get thinner MDF and do other things. So I've got this idea, and I'll see if this works. I've got a really nice box that is super close to the right dimension for the drawer, so it'll captivate that. And then I've got some spacers to hold this in place. This will work for different size drawers. Then I've got 2 passes. It's actually going to be 3 passes total. So first I'll start with this pass, and I've cut this out. One thing I did with these when I cut them out was I sanded it lightly, and then it was kind of burned and a little bit of charcoal coming off. So I sanded it lightly, and then I just threw some Varathane on there, just some cheap insurance to try to keep them clean, and that seemed to work pretty well. So these are my jigs, and if I got all my measurements right for offsets and a 1/2 inch blade in the router, I'm going to run this around, and I'm going to create a little pocket in the drawer front with the router. Then I'll go through on a second pass with an edge router, or a little corner bead, and I'll just make that smooth so it's not sharp on your fingers. And then this is a T-slot bit, and so I'll go for the third pass, and I'll drop down into that hole, and I'll route around the edge, and it'll give you something to catch onto, and it'll kind of create a form. So this will either be a whole lot of dust and a bunch of mess, or this will be really cool, because if it works, then I can do drawer fronts with no hardware that will look nice, they'll work as drawer pulls, and it'll just come out of the MDF as it is. So that'll be kind of fun to try. So here goes. First pass, I'm going to use the 1/2 inch bit. I'm going to set it to the right depth, and I'm going to try to hog out basically my handle, or my hole for my handle. See how that goes. Well, the first pass, the shape looked great. I went ahead and I just went in 3/8 the first time because it's quite a bit I've got a 1/2 inch bit. I could probably go down 5/8, but being new to doing this and trying this jig out the first time, I'm just going to go 3/8. I'll run it again at 5/8. And I was also it was hanging up because my little router dust guard started kind of losing a screw. So I will tighten that back up and then try the second pass. Okay, so that cleaned up well at full depth. Now I'm just going to use a little roundover bit, and because I'm going to cut out like an underhang, I need to do this roundover first. So I've got the second router set up here. And that just gives it a smoother edge to grab. So now I need to switch to the other bit for the router that will cut the underhang. So now I've got my bit that's going to cut an underhang, and I don't want to cut it all the way around the edges on the low side. I just want to cut it on the top. So I need to drop it in on one side, only cut on the top, and come out on that upper side again. So I'll switch to the upper template because it's got a different radius and a different path, but it should be registered with the other one. And we'll see how this goes. It's kind of fun. Well, that's pretty cool. I'll bring this over to you. So I've got a nice pocket that's rounded over all the way around, and then it's undercut up on that upper part, so when you reach in, you can grab that. And it's got a good feel to it. There's an edge up in there that you know is there. And no hardware, flat front, and a nice little drawer pull, and that'll be easy to crank those out. I can do those passes. I can walk through a bunch of, and not have to switch out the bits for every pass. I just wanted to try one of these. But I'm excited. I'll trim up the edges of this a little bit and clean it up, but I'll get these other two drawers done, and then we'll see how it all goes together. Well, I'm 2 for 3, and when I do something like that, it makes me realize it's probably time for lunch. I actually didn't switch out my jigs for the 2U drawer here, and it looks okay, except it grooved all the way around, and that would catch dust and get mess in there, and I also hit it on the way in. So it's easy to cut another one of these fronts, and it's cheap into MDF, but the other two, the 1Us look really nice, so I'll go eat some lunch, cut another one of these out, and I'll move on to putting these in. With the drawer pulls all done, the last thing to do was to just go ahead and put a chamfer around all the edges so that they'd look nice and they wouldn't have a sharp edge to ding up. All right, with my blunder with the larger drawer behind me, I'm actually running out of material. I've got almost no MDF left, but I was able to take one of the pieces that I had used earlier and construct a way to get more material. So I got enough for a door front. And so now I just need to glue these up, and I'm just gonna hold it together with a couple of screws. It should be fine. And I've got little spacer blocks on each side so that I can get it centered well, just by feel. And I'll clamp it while I screw it so it doesn't walk around while I'm screwing it together. And there's a complete drawer.
On the road, I've been away for far too long, but now I'm on my way back home. I hear the west winds calling out my name. They telling me to head your way, down your road and past your gates. Keep your eyes on the horizon. I was looking to belong when I'd already found my home. I'm there before the setting sun, for you to fall into my arms, a place I call my home. I was looking to belong when I already found my home.
All right, well, that was a lot of fun to put together. These drawers are going to work well. I'm pleased with the way the handles worked out. I'm also really pleased with the jigs and being able to cut those on the laser, because that will make things much easier. I'll go ahead and put the settings that I used on my laser. It's going to be different for everybody. So I'll put the settings below in the description that I was using for this 3/8 inch MDF. And I'm going to try some smaller, thinner MDF in future episodes, and I'll show you what the settings are for that as well. I ended up with a big pile of jigs and spacers and things that will make building the next module much, much quicker. Future episodes, I'm going to get this set up in the upper level there behind the curtain. The curtain is primarily to manage the dust. It acts as a decent backdrop for videos too, but I'm going to try to improve the dust collection up there and kind of get these things set up so that I can work in a cleaner environment. And I didn't have enough bench dogs to hang this into my module yet. And so next episode, you'll see this thing hung in there, and I can start to use it and make sure this spacing is right for the drawers to be able to stash tools and things underneath there when I'm working. I really appreciate you watching. If you want to watch more of these workshop videos or the other videos I do, please subscribe. I'll always note the playlist for the workshop with a special icon in the thumbnails, because I know I do tractor videos and other things. It may seem like these are really scattered, but they are all building towards a cabin out there on the coast where I'm going to build the cabinetry and use a lot of this equipment as well as the tractor to prepare that and everything. So thanks for watching, and until I see you next, I'll be out building.
Like a light in the night, you will always